All right, we are welcoming Dan Fisher on the podcast today. So, Dan, welcome and thank you for coming on.
Well, thanks for having me, Brandon. I appreciate it.
Yeah, so I want to talk about how it feels to sell your business. But before we get into that, I kind of want to go backwards in time a bit. I want to hear, because I know a bit of your story, but I don't think I know all of it. So, I have here, you've been with Magic for 40 years. Is that correct?
That is correct. Yeah. Yeah.
So, can you take me back to those early days and kind of what inspired that whole journey?
Yeah. So when we say 40 years, the business started in 1984 when my dad purchased a small video rental store.
Hmm.
For your younger listeners, they may not even know what that is,
That's a
but
VHS.
yeah, the early version of Blockbuster, so to speak. So yeah, we rented out the VHS tapes and the VCRs, which were the little machines that played them. And back in the day, very few people owned the machines, so they would rent them from
Hmm.
us every weekend. And we had my dad had the idea of, hey, let's just let them keep the VCR. We'll charge them $10 a week, and then they'll own it after a while. And so that was a pretty big hit. But we kind of stayed with the video rental business for a while, and then it was myself and at the time my girlfriend who we really wanted to expand into a different business. And
You
you
good?
can't hear me. Can you
No, I
hear me?
can. Oh yeah.
Oh, sorry, I lost you.
No, you're good. Quick
Hopefully you can
question
edit
on the
this.
VHSs. How big were the VCRs back then? They were huge, right?
Yeah, they were huge. So, like, I don't know if you can see me, but like more than shoulder width and probably a foot high and probably 20-25 pounds. And,
Okay,
you
that's what
know,
I.
yeah, huge. So, and then you had all sorts of wires, and the TVs at that time were not really made to easily connect. So it was a real hassle to bring them back and forth. So,
Yeah,
yeah, it
sure.
wasn't just the money. It was the hassle of connecting and disconnecting. So yeah. Anyway, we saw the kind of the recurring revenue model was pretty cool there, and the video rental business. Anyone who worked in a video store can tell you it was just so up and down. If there was a big hit, then you would rent the movies, and if there weren't some big hits, you could be really really slow. So it was a very up and down business, and
Hmm.
so we really expanded that rental business from VCRs to TVs to furniture to washers and dryers. And it's funny because my wife, who I'm married to now, I only met about 12 years ago now, and we found out after quite a while that she used to be a customer in one of our video stores. And she laughed because she said, "Yeah, I really liked the store, but it was always kind of funny. You would go in there and there would be videos around the walls, and then in the center there were sofas and washers and dryers. I thought it was just kind of odd, but that was kind of the mom and pop nature of our business back then, back the old
Okay, so
days."
even when you were still as the video store, you started renting other things out.
Exactly. Yeah, that's how it all started, and that became
Interesting.
a bigger and bigger and bigger part of the business to where eventually those revenues dwarfed the revenues of the video part. And we saw the handwriting on the wall when Blockbuster came to town and opened up, and literally, a Blockbuster would open up down the street from one of our stores, and our revenue was cut in half overnight. So from the videos, so we saw the handwriting on the wall, and slowly just switched into just the rent-own model.
Yeah, so not only creating a successful business, it's almost like a second, you also had to go through like a transformation period in the middle of that. That's a lot of people, well, I don't even know the stats for this, but I'm assuming that's way harder than you just made it sound. Like saying, seeing the writing on the wall and actually making the move to make changes for longevity and sustainability, like that was a big move.
Yeah, and it was a crazy time because we really loved the video business. I mean, that was a
Yeah.
fun business, watching all the movies and all that part of it. And the rental business is fun in a different way, but not nearly the same attraction as watching the movies. And it's really it was challenging, and it's why I kind of had to branch off into that business initially on my own. At the time, it was with my girlfriend, but we actually went out and we got, the way we funded it was we applied for credit cards, and we
Mm.
got credit card after credit card after credit card, and bought this merchandise with the credit card proceeds because we didn't have money. The video rental business was very like I said, up and down, but not very profitable for us at least. And so it was a borrowing binge. And finally, like I said, when that started steamrolling, my dad and mom and my brother and some of my brother's in-laws and so forth, they kind of came on board as investors to get it rolling. But yeah, it was a scary time. Because the
Mm.
video business, you could kind of see the handwriting on the wall that it wasn't going to make it, especially with Blockbuster coming to town. And then, even long term, you could kind of even see the Blockbuster thing coming. I wish I had seen it a little more readily. I would have invested in Netflix when they first came out. But
Yeah. Is your family always been entrepreneurial?
I think my dad always had that hunger in him. He worked for a large corporation for most of his career, but he was always that guy just willing to take a chance. He did
Yeah.
a bunch of different things over the years. He did accounting for people on the side. He was just a hungry guy. I think the thing I got from him more than anything is probably my work ethic, but also that entrepreneurial spirit. It's interesting because my brother laughs at me because he just, he sees me that I took after my dad in that role. Like, I'm willing to try anything. And so many times it ends up in failure, but that's part of what entrepreneurship is about, right? You
Yeah.
try 10 things and one of them might work if you're lucky. So
Yeah. So you have a high tolerance for risk then.
definitely. Yeah.
It's just
Yeah,
another failure and you figure it out and sorted it out to something. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I wish I had more of that.
Well, it's funny because when you talk to people who don't have it, like, I have close friends who are in a more traditional business role, and they almost just shake their head when they hear the things that we try and do and so on. And you and I have talked about different business ventures that I would like to get in, and it's just it can be scary, I think, for people who aren't in that frame of mind, I guess you would say.
Yeah, it's pretty interesting because I would say I have that spirit like with YouTube. Like I'm not afraid to try the next channel, but like there's really no monetary risk to that, right? It's just buying some equipment and trying something new and see if it sticks. Where some people think that's insane and such a waste of time. Where it's like it's got low capital, but you can try it and see what happens. You know what I mean? You just have to be creative enough. That's really funny. I don't know
But
if
it's
I
still
thought.
that time investment. Like, I think there's a similarity there because, I mean, I know you value your time,
Yeah.
and for you to invest your time in the things you do, it's a very similar, I think, risk. It's just time versus capital, so to speak.
Yeah. Yeah. Fair point. So, growing a business to 14 locations is a big deal. What were some of the biggest challenges you faced in scaling Magic, and how did you overcome them?
Yeah, so we had three stores that we had our Lancaster store, our Columbia, PA store, and our York, PA store, and we were just running on all cylinders. The stores were doing great, and we just whenever we would I guess we would get to this point where we became a little complacent, and so
Mm,
things would level off business wise. And our solution to that, before I understood leadership, really, our solution was we got to shake things up by opening another store. So we would open another store, and then usually it's amazing how that energized everyone. Because I didn't have the ability or the skill set back then to realize that I can energize people in different ways. I don't have to
mm,
open a new store to do that. So much, much later in my career, I learned that, I think a better way to do that. But so that's how we kind of slowly grew. And then we got to that fourth store, which was our Harrisburg store. And when we opened that, it was really challenging for us, different market, different set of employees, and just a little, I guess, think because we were a little more spread out. Um, we struggled with that one, and we started to realize we need some more infrastructure because at that point it was really me, one other person, and then we had our store managers and the store level employees. So we didn't have any back office or anything. And my dad kind of always did the accounting part of it, but I was, myself and one other person were really the operations team, and we found that we were really lacking. So we really had a huddle one time. It was myself, my dad, and this one other person who was part of our team. And we said, look, we either need to settle in and accept these four stores and really just work hard to grow those. Or if we want to grow, we need to add a few stores so that we can justify a home
mm,
office infrastructure, so to speak. So what we did was we said, all right, let's open I don't know if we decided to open 4 stores or if we decided to open 2, and a couple others came along. But within a period of 2 years, we opened 2 stores and then 2 more. So we doubled our size in 2 years. And then right on the heels of that, we had an opportunity to buy 5 more stores at a heavily discount because they were really going out of business. And so we went from 4 to 13 stores, not intentionally, so to speak, but it happened that way. And that really gave us the sales volume to allow us to add some infrastructure to the team. So we
Sure.
added, some district managers, and we added an accounting person full time, and things like that. But I think that was an important decision to make, to say, all right, we have to grow big enough so that we can justify that home office team. And it was a struggle because we didn't have anyone on our team who really had the leadership training, leadership experience. We kind of muddled through all of that at that
Yeah.
time. I had never done anything other than this. This was my job. My
Yeah.
only other job was working in the cafeteria at F&M when I was going there. So that was it.
Yeah, it's interesting. I hear scalability is essentially what you're talking about. And that getting over those plateaus, it sounds like the stores is really what kind of forced you into figuring that out and allowed you, like you said, the volume to be able to do something like that. Hmm.
Yeah, and I think that's a natural plateau. For us, it was the stores. I think for other companies, it's certain sales volumes where you get to where you need additional people to, in my case, to take facets of the role off of my plate. And I learned much later that I should be focusing on the things I'm good at and the things I like, and letting other people do the things um, that are maybe my weaknesses. And
Hmm.
it took me a long, long time to learn that. What I usually did instead was hired people and let them do what they liked, and I did everything that was left over, which can lead to burnout and can lead to real struggles. So anyone who's listening who is in this situation, I mean, make sure you're focusing on what you like to do and what you're good
Hmm.
at, and hire people then specifically for those skill sets that you're not good at and you don't like. And through personality profiling, I realized very recently that there are people who love to do the things that I hate to do. And that's just a foreign concept to me. I'm sure most people are in the same boat. If you love something, you figure everyone loves it. And if you hate something, you figure everyone hates it, but it's just not true.
You mentioned a couple times about how it took you much later in life. What was your eureka, like leadership moment? Do you remember? Was it anything specific?
I do. There was, you mentioned it earlier. We've had a few opportunities in this 40-year journey to pivot, so to speak. And our big pivot, our biggest pivot was probably, I think it was January of 2017. It's kind of emblazoned in my mind, where we had muddled through this 13 store setup for a couple of years at that point. And, we had lost some of our key people because
Hmm.
we went from, I mentioned, 4 to 13 stores and for us, a relatively short period of time. And and I was driving people. I was expecting more, and some people that just weren't up to the task left. And a lot of the new people we inherited with this new company left because we were driving for our culture, our results. And what I realized is we need to figure out what our culture is. And at that
Hmm.
time, I was reading a book called The Advantage by Patrick Lencioni, and I know I've talked to you about it before. And
Yeah.
it's kind of been the Bible of my business life since January 2017. And I really used that as my guideline on how to establish a leadership team, how to establish kind of identify, I guess you would say, our core values, and then how to put those into play, and really make it spread throughout the company, a clear understanding of what we're about and where we're going to go from here. So what we did really was take our company back to the culture we had when we had those 3 stores that were just rocking and rolling. And we identified what got us success back then, and we just put that into play in the company. And like I said, in January 2017, we figured it out, what we wanted to do, and then we just put that into play. And over the next year, 2 years, we transformed the company so that it went from being very hard to being much more fun and much more energized, much more energizing for the people in it. And really worked hard to get people in the right places to run it. Having 14 locations, it's 13 stores and then our home office and our warehouse um, in different parts of central PA, I find very challenging. I
Mm.
think that trying to spread culture and spread communication to multiple locations for me was a struggle, and we really worked hard at it and had some success. I can't say we were perfect, but we definitely turned the tide in that meeting.
So anybody who's not really on board with culture who may be listening, did you see those changes hit the bottom line?
Oh my gosh, it was almost instantaneously.
Okay.
In that first, we had leveled off for about 2 years, and then in that first year, we grew about, I think it was 12%, and then in the 5 years after that, we doubled our sales without opening a store, without really changing anything we did except for hiring the right people, challenging them for results, and really being laser focused on results. But the culture led to that. So certainly, it came down to us being more focused on strategy. So we started quarterly offsites. We started weekly team meetings to execute strategy and so forth. So there was a lot to it. It wasn't just hire the right people and everything's going to fall into place, but it was a whole structure that through strategy, through execution of strategy, and most importantly, having the right team members who were willing and able to do that. Yeah, it definitely had a bottom line effect for sure. Top
Mm.
line effect, double sales, but bottom line was even more dramatic.
Awesome. Yeah, I always live by the happy people or efficient people. And I do think, efficiency, engagement, those two things kind of hopefully go hand in hand. And then they're always going to help, I think, a little bit of everything of the business. Um, so yeah, no, I'm right there with you. You describe yourself as a servant leader. What does that mean to you?
Well, again, something I learned later in my career. We discovered our
There's lots
industry
of later
groups.
eurekas,
Yeah,
Dan.
yeah. I wish I had these eurekas 20 years ago. But we discovered some industry groups, trade groups. We kind of, as I mentioned earlier, we grew up in this business kind of on our own. And when we discovered some industry groups, we discovered that the rent to own industry is full of really generous, giving people. Through being a part of those groups, you just would hear these business owners sharing what made them successful, what they're doing today in marketing, what they're doing
Mm.
with people, and so forth. And I found that it was just amazing to me that they were willing to give these secrets, secrets of success, sometimes to their direct competitors, but certainly to other people around the country. And so I would take a lot of these ideas, put them into play, and what I realized is when I started serving on the boards of these industry groups, and I started speaking, which as I'm a self-proclaimed introvert. I'm sure I've mentioned that once or twice. And for someone like me to stand up on a stage and speak and give my thoughts on things, and it was very rewarding for me to hear that people actually wanted to hear from me,
Mm.
and it's kind of a what goes around comes around type of thing, I guess. And so people gave me ideas. I gave other different people ideas. And then they came back to me later and said, hey, I was able to use this in my business and it really helped me, or I appreciated this thought or whatever. And it's honestly kind of a selfish thing because it just makes me feel so good, and so then likewise in our business, in our inside business, we just spread that if I can help you be successful, store manager or sales specialist or delivery specialist, if I can help you be more successful, that helps me be more successful. So it's kind of a circular thing where I found over the years that the more I give, the more I get. So it's not only do
Mm.
I get by feeling better about myself and who I am, but I get by the business being more successful and by other people's businesses being more successful that I'm helping out. So that's kind of what I think of it as is I'm helping people, but it's also helping me at the same time. It's very rewarding to just give back.
What would you say to someone who doesn't fall, like who's more from the competitive side, right? So there's a lot of people out there who would not give any trade secrets. I have people, that in SWF that we talk about that quite often, like, employees, work, customers, blah, blah, blah. I just don't, I'm a competitive person by nature, but I don't live in that. I think there's enough work for everyone. Where do you
Yeah.
sit on that?
Yeah, I'm in the mold of what you just said. I think there's plenty of work out there for everybody, and if I'm sharing my ideas and it helps make your company better, that challenges us to be even better. And
Mm.
it's not always a zero sum game, right? So
Ooh, nice.
we can gain more business for all of us by having a better product and a better service, and especially in our business of rent to own, which, you know, some of the publicity here is so negative. I think our
Mm.
customers would beg to differ on that. And so the more we can provide top quality service to our customers, the more customers we can get to love us as an industry, then the more people that come to the industry. So if I can help, you know, 100% of the dealers in our industry give top quality service, then that expands the industry and helps everyone do better. And so I think in particular in our industry, that's true, but I think in almost any industry, helping people do better and be better creates innovation, creates new ideas, and probably expands the overall market.
Yeah, I think it's brilliantly said. I totally agree. So I want to move to your decision on selling. And so deciding to sell something you built for decades, it must be quite an emotional thing. So can you walk us through that thought process, key factors that led to that decision, kind of that process? I'm sure there's a lot of people that, well, I don't know, I know how many people listen, but there may be somebody in the audience who's like, you know what, getting close to that time period and is quite an emotional toll. So what did that look like for you? How did you finally get over the hurdle?
Yeah, it's something that, you know, I've always kept my toes in the water. You know, for example, in our industry, Rent-A-Center and Aaron's, two larger corporations, um, Rent-A-Center in particular, throughout the years, has almost always been willing to buy. So every once in a while, you know, I would say, hey, how much will you give us? You know, you
Yeah.
throw them a few numbers, and they send you a number that you say, well, you know, I could make this in 3 or 4 years, so why would I sell? And that's the way most small businesses do sell. They sell for 3, 4, 5 years earnings. So, you know, when you're doing something you love to do, and you're working with people that you really enjoy working with, it's really hard to approach that. And I was
Mm.
never that person who went into business to sell. Like it never even occurred to me that our goal in owning a business is to sell it. And I know there are other people who that's what they do. They open a business and their goal is to sell it in 5 years or whatever. And I admire that. But also I admire people who are with it for 40, 50, 100 years. You know, I've just met a business guy the other day who it's a family business they've had for 100 years. And I was
Wow.
amazed by that. But as far as the decision to sell, for me, it was trying to find my mission, I guess you would say, my personal mission for the
Mm.
second phase of my life. And you know, we've talked in our Vistage group about that several times. I mentioned different things were moving me one way or the other, and at times it was, well, I'm doing. I feel like I'm doing so much for the people that work in our company that that could be my mission, and yet, you know, there's so many. You know, honestly, for me, one of the real challenges is the ancillary things that most
Mm.
people probably wouldn't be bothered by. But I'm such a passionate person about the culture we've built that,
Yeah.
you know, if you know, anyone that's been in business knows that a lawsuit's going to come along every once in a while, and
Mm.
many times they're going to be most of us would consider frivolous, let's say, or there's going to be an insurance claim, or there's going to be a car accident, or there's going to be a workers' comp claim. I mean, all that stuff is just cost of doing business. But for me, I took that stuff way too personally. If it was
Gotcha.
A, if it was either what I would consider bogus, or B, if it was something that happened that could have been prevented, right?
Yeah.
If
Hmm.
we had done a better job of preventing the workers' comp injury or preventing the accident or whatever. And so those things take a personal toll on me. You know, I share, you know, readily that, you know, something that took a super personal toll was the loss of my daughter when she was 18. She was in a car accident, and from that point on, that's been about 7 years now. Everything was magnified. So it's
Mm.
hard to explain if you haven't been through, you know, such a tragedy like that, but it's everything's magnified. So that little thing that might bother me a little bit in the past now is like 10 times as bothersome. And so I found myself thinking more and more about, you know, I just need to, I think, focus more energy on something that really is a passion of mine from a servant's perspective. In other words, whether it's we have a foundation in her honor that I really want to spend time on, and really make it important. And I have many years left in me, so I want to do it while I still have the energy, and not wait until I'm 70. So that was probably the the single most motivating
Mm.
factor for me. But also just having done the same thing for 40 years, really. I've worked for one company, and it was that one. So having done the same thing for 40 years, I felt like it was time to move. And so even over the years, like I said, over the years, I had talked to various companies, and finally I came across one when the time was right, and also I felt like the partner was right, where they were someone interested in using our brand as kind of the basis of a larger company, that rolling up rent to own companies, but with our brand and our core values and our team as the basis of it. And so I felt like it was a really big win-win opportunity where I was able to exit, where my team would be in place and really have a chance to grow, not just stay in place, but the goal is to grow much larger over the next few years. And so that was kind of what always held me back in the past. Is it
Sure.
was never my intent to sell, but yeah, if the right number comes along, but it has to be the right number combined with the right situation, because these people are very important to me, and I wanted to make sure I at least gave them a chance of being able to grow with the new company. Yeah.
Was the magic legacy important as this as being sustained?
That's an interesting question. It is in the sense, I would say no.
Okay.
That wasn't a deciding factor. I love the legacy we've built and the team we built, but for me, it was more about the team. And if the company came in and said, "Hey, we're changing the name to Joe's Rental Shop," um, I think that would not have been a smart idea because I think we built a pretty good brand. But it was not important to me about the name or the brand as much as it was about having the people have a place to go and grow. I think it's cool that they kept the brand, and I'm hopeful, and I'm somewhat confident that they'll take the brand and run with it and actually make it even better.
Mm.
Because I was very proud of recent recognition as best places to work in PA, best places to work in the USA by Inc. magazine. Those things were important to me, but only because they were voted on by the employees. And that told me that, hey, we're doing something right here. We're making people feel like they want to be at work and want to serve the customers that we serve.
Mm.
That was important to me more so than the name and that part of it. Does that make sense? What I'm trying to say?
Yeah,
Make
no,
sense?
it totally does. It's not about, I think you said it perfectly, is not only is it the security of their current employment, but it's also the growth opportunities for the future. I think that,
Yeah.
I think that's part of your journey was always to keep pushing the envelope, right? And keep growing the company. And it sounds like that next iteration is also going to keep kind of that same thought process, which is cool.
Yeah, and that's
Yeah.
that's that's the other thing I didn't mention is my team was ready to grow. They wanted to open stores. They wanted to grow, and
Yeah.
and again that same, I call it a fear almost, that fear of the next thing, the next lawsuit, the next workers' comp, the next accident. That same
Mm.
fear kept me from growing, and I felt like I was doing them a disservice by kind of being frozen in fear to some extent. So yeah.
Have you always been a person that takes that stuff personally? Like even in your personal life, like if friendships dissolve or anything like that, do you take that on the chin a lot of the time?
Yeah, I think I tend to be a pretty emotional guy. Um, I take things personally, and unfortunately, I have an amazing wife who helps me put things in perspective
Sure.
and so on. But yeah, I do. I mean, I feel like I give a lot of myself, and I still need to learn that part where you give just to give. You don't give expecting anything in return.
Mm.
I know that's the way it's supposed to be, but
That's hard, dude.
so when something bad happens, and I feel like there's a little bit of a, I don't know if disrespect would be the word, or just you try so hard to do good, and when someone kind of does at least a perceived bad thing towards you, I do take it very personally and emotionally,
Hmm.
and it's something I need to work to overcome for sure.
Was there any unexpected challenges or surprises during the transition process, either professionally or personally, that you can?
Yeah, yeah. I'll list them alphabetically. No, I
How
mean,
much time do we have?
yeah. So many things, and again, because I think you have this title, "Selling Your Business" or whatever.
Yeah.
I want to list some things to just make sure that people
Yeah.
understand.
Brilliant.
So we make sure your accounting is uh,
Mm.
professionally done. So I always prided myself on being cheap. I was very low cost. And so when my banks asked for example, accountant prepared financial statements, which you pay, I think we would have paid $6,000 for them. I said, well, I'm not doing that. I don't need to do that. You have my accounting and things like that. Had I done them 5 years ago and had, 3 or 5 years of better prepared accounting statements, better prepared financial statements, I should say, um, the process of due diligence would have gone more smoothly.
Mm.
We had good accounting, but just not gap accounting, I guess you would say. In other words, not up to the standards of a CPA that's auditing
Sure.
our financials for the buyer. That's something I would have done differently.
That's
So,
good.
for anyone who's considering selling your business, speak now, 3 years, 5 years ahead of time with your CPA, with your accounting firm, and make sure you are preparing your financials accordingly, because you're going to get a look back period of 3 to 5 years. And that's something that, A, it'll help you run your business better, but B, it'll definitely help a buyer
Sure.
uh, evaluate the business better. Um, having having every single contract that you're involved with, even if so our business was sold as an asset sale, as most businesses are. I don't think most companies come in and buy an actual corporation or LLC. They typically buy the assets because they don't want the liabilities, or the hidden liabilities, the potential liabilities. My understanding of that was, great. Well, you buy the assets and I'll worry about everything else. But again, most law firms that are buyers are going to want to know what the potential liabilities are, because there's still risk there, because they now have all your assets, and the potential, let's say there's a huge lawsuit somewhere, that lawsuit could possibly roll back that asset
Mm.
sale. So a good lawyer wants to look back and say, hey, let's make sure that they don't have any of these crazy liabilities. So making sure you have all of your, every contract you could ever think of that's in place, available and easily accessible. And most companies do have a file, or in physical files or whatever. But the due diligence period was extensive and
Mm.
exhausting. Um, if you're an entrepreneur and you're working in your business quite a bit, it can be almost overwhelming, the amount of
Mm.
work to be done with it. Now, in my case, again, most of my team was not aware of the potential sale. That's the other thing I might, if I had to do over again, if I'm thinking about selling, I might introduce the idea to my team 2 or 3 years ahead of time also, and say, hey, I just want you all to know, this is something that might happen a few years from now. And I just want you to know that if it does, we're going to talk about it and we're going to go through it. In my case, because it was never discussed, it would have been a mistake to discuss it, because,
Mm.
and it's funny because my COO I spoke to a few months ahead of the actual sale close date. And I spoke to him when I thought it was going to be imminent, and then it got delayed a few months. And he said, "I'm so glad you didn't tell me way back when this started, because in this couple of months here, my stomach's been churning, and
Oh no.
it's been on my mind and everything else." So I think it is best to. I think you have to be careful how to address it with the people, because
Yeah.
it's not that it's not that the deceptive to hide it, I guess you would say, but then it also weighs them down, and they're in the back of their mind, are they going to keep my job? Are they not going to keep my job? And since I knew that I was keeping that their jobs were all protected, I think I did the right thing. But
Mm.
if I had thought about it a couple of years ahead of time and knew I was going to be selling, I would have probably handled that part of it differently in terms of
That's
just
interesting.
letting everyone know, hey, we're preparing this business for sale eventually. We're going to find a buyer that's going to hopefully keep everyone, and so on and so forth. I might have done that.
Yeah, that's a little scary though. I can understand how that because you're not sure how everybody's going to take it, right? And you don't
Yeah.
want to cause a mass exodus, but I think you build a good culture, so I think it's a tough call, man. That's a tough one.
Yeah, so I'm
But
not sure. I hear you. I'm not sure which way I would go on that if I had it to do over again. In my case, I think what I did was correct. I mean, basically, the COO knew, and we told everyone else the day of, and it was a shock. But it was also, I think, we had everything lined up, a Q&A. We had because we're in 14 locations, we had a Zoom call, and then I followed it with a video that explained everything in more detail on our internal Facebook page, and then we had Q&As. We visited all the stores with myself and the new CEO, and so I think we did all of that very well. Where I think the more you can answer questions, be
mm,
available, be accessible, that's something I think we did a really good job with. And so I think there was some fear, but minimal fear once we got through that process.
nice. Yeah. Anything else that somebody should have ready besides that, some of that?
Again, I think just having the people in place, the right people in place, the financials
Mm,
clear and clean. Um, that's what made our business attractive to the buyers was the staff, the team that we had in place, and again, making myself replaceable, I guess you would say. So when they came in with me sharing with them that my team pretty much runs this now. I've over the last year or so, I really stepped away from almost everything except for our poorly done financials, which is what I still handle.
the
so
non CPA'd.
I was handling most of the financial stuff because we did not have a CFO. We did not have a controller even. We had essentially a bookkeeper and then myself. And that was a mistake. That's something if I
Mm.
were to open up another business, I would make sure I had the financial pieces in place from near the beginning. But otherwise, yeah, I think having the team in place so that the new company can come in and hit the ground running with the operational piece in place, that was a big plus for us.
Yeah, so I just want to make sure everybody understands exactly what you're saying here is if you're an owner or a founder of a company and you are spending a lot of time in the business instead of on the business, selling your business will be difficult because you are the business.
Yeah, no, it's so important to realize that because if you were to walk away tomorrow and the business would cut in half because you're not involved, then the business isn't really worth that much. You're worth it. They should just hire
Mm,
you instead of buying the business. That's 100% true. I think that's something I think over the past couple of years that I really was fortunate in that I found a really good operations person who took
mm,
over. I felt very comfortable having him running the day to day while I kind of stepped into just the financial role, and that made a big difference. I think and also in the smooth transition because knowing this was coming, I stepped out of the spotlight a lot too because I had been really always the face of the company to the employees, and so over the last couple of years, I intentionally made him more the face of the company. And then when I knew the sale was coming, I just really pushed that issue a lot more. So I stepped back more and more on it. I think
mm.
it made the transition very smooth.
That's not always easy though, especially as an owner founder,
No, no, not at
passing
all.
that baton.
Yeah, it's tough. I mean, again, as an introvert, I never wanted to be the face of the company per se, but
Mm,
there is that rewarding feeling when, I love when people reach out to me and ask me a question about something. I know that sounds silly, but where they feel like and I say, oh, here, you can talk to this person, you can talk to that person, or they reach out and thank me for something that we've done for them, or, as this was all happening, people reaching out to me. And it's hard to step away from that because you've meant so much to so many people, and hearing about it is like I said earlier, that reward that you get for being hopefully
mm.
perceived as a good boss. There is a lot to be said for that, and it is hard to step back from that.
Yeah. What are you most proud of in terms of the impact your business had on the community or the industry?
Well, on the industry in particular, I love that when we go to shows, there's two trade shows a year, and when we go there, usually myself or more often now, some of my employees are speakers at the show,
Oh,
and
that's cool.
we're always very sought after. In other words, people come up to us and say, "Hey, I want to know what Magic's doing." That's I love when we share that, and then people embrace it and like it. And it's one of the reasons we like to take store managers to these shows, because when people are coming up and wanting to hear from them, and they're talking about how Magic does this, Magic does that, or we want to know
Yeah.
how Magic does it, it also lets them go back to their stores with a real sense of pride that we are considered one of the top companies in the industry in terms of operators and so forth. So that's super rewarding for me, and just the pride that I see in their faces, and of course the people that maybe wouldn't have been speakers 5 years ago. Some of my DMs and my COO now very comfortably speaking to dozens and dozens of business owners, hundreds of
That's
people in
brilliant.
some cases, and it's really really rewarding. As far as
Hmm.
community goes, well, I mentioned before, just being voted best places to work by our own employees is super rewarding. But then I think one of the reasons that they love working for Magic is the amount that we do give back to the community and participate in the community. We're very active. Recently it seems like most of the schools in our area have had need of washers and dryers, so we would donate those. And there's just a lot of local opportunities to donate. And especially when you're in the furniture and appliance business, it makes it easy to really
Yeah.
participate in that. So I think it's very rewarding for the people that work there to say, yeah, we can do that. And they know they have the approval of ownership to make those commitments.
Yeah, it's awesome. Hmm. So with the sale now officially behind you, right? Pretty much
Yeah.
all
Yeah.
done. What are your plans moving forward? What are, you talked about some of them at the beginning of this. Do you have any nailed down ventures or passions that you want to hone in on in the next couple of years?
Uh, so we're 2.5 months past closing and still finalizing like details. It's crazy how challenging it is to close down a business,
Yeah.
because like I said, they bought the assets, so I still have all these accounts and all these vendor relationships and everything to close down. So still working on that, but my wife and I, we really are passionate about working with our foundation and finding the right partners there where we can really help some other nonprofits be successful. And then as far as funding the foundation, we're looking to open or buy a small business. We don't know what that looks like yet. We've had a lot of brainstorming sessions, but my first mission really is once this is all wound down, where I'm like, I'm looking at my computer list of things to do, and there's just not much on it. Then I'm going to take 2 or 3 months and just really unwind and relax and try to learn how to decompress. It's
Hmm.
something I've never been good at. And so taking a couple months after, there's no pressure, and saying, all right, I'm just going to relax and maybe play some golf or maybe do something for a couple months. And then we're really going to start researching and brainstorming. So we've looked online at some franchise opportunities. We've brainstormed a lot of interesting business ideas. And so just continuing with that. And then I think it's probably safe to say in a year from now, we'll have some kind of a business. And that business, the idea is have all the profits from that business fund the foundation. I'm not a fundraiser in the sense that I'm really good at saying, "Hey, Brandon, do you want to donate $100 to my foundation?" I know you
Yeah.
would, but I'm
Yeah.
not. I'm not that. I'm not. I don't like asking people for money. I know it's the way the world works with foundations, but I would rather run a business, have fun doing that, and then have the profits from that go into the foundation, and
That's
just
brilliant.
have a small business. Something that's fun and easy, and something we chose, not something we kind of stumbled into. I mean, I'm really proud of the way the other business was formed, but it wasn't. It was kind of something we stumbled into. It wasn't something we researched and said this is what we want to do. So that's what I want to do with phase two.
Any concerns with an identity crisis without having work to do every day?
There's some, but I'll be honest with you. I think because I'm still very, in my mind, very young, and I still know I have more to do. I think
Sure.
it's a little different than that identity crisis that you might get if your goal is to retire. Like I'm
Yep.
definitely not retiring. I never for a day said to myself, or I know my wife knows me better than this, but I never said I'm retiring at this. It's just phase two, so I'm not really worried about having an identity crisis because I think that I'll be moving on and doing something different. If it were
Okay.
retirement, yeah, because I know I'm not the type of person that can sit still, and I think it's important though to know that about yourself
Mm.
when you're selling a business. So what is next step, and really
Ooh,
think
good
about
one.
that. My brother, who did retire at age 50, um, he he said he never had regrets, but he said it's really important to figure out what you're going to do. And now he's a part owner of a small business, and he always had little projects and little mini businesses going because again he was very young when he retired. So he's like semi-retired, but then he's still keeping his days very busy with different projects and so forth. So I think it is important if you're thinking about selling, you know, 6 months from now, what am I going to do?
Yeah.
And if you think you're just going to like figure it out, that's something I think that's really important to know ahead of time. And I think I shared this with my Vistage group. I had a whole list of things. I still have it on my phone. I haven't gotten to any of them yet, the hobbies and so on that I wanted to do, different hobbies, different things like that. But I've just been so busy with the closing down and the brainstorming and so on. I haven't really had that opportunity, but I don't fear that feeling being lost at all.
Okay. Any advice for new entrepreneurs through your 40-year journey?
Yeah, lots of it actually. And you hear this from everyone, but I can't stress how true it is. Either read or listen to podcasts or listen to audiobooks about leadership, about whatever you're in. If you're in sales, listen to sales. There's so much to learn from other people that you
Mm.
can either figure it out yourself over 40 years, or you could have learned it from someone in probably 5 years. When I look at my career, I wish I had known now what I knew, or I wish I knew then
Mm.
what I know now. And so I think peer groups. I can't stress enough how important it's been for me to make connections in my industry group, but then also my Vistage group, which has only been what 4 years, 5 years,
Yeah.
something like that. It's been life changing for me. It helped me make this decision. It helped me process this decision. It helped me get out of the way of the new CEO just recently when I was maybe trying to be too helpful, um,
Stage 5 clinger.
so I think it's just all that stuff. I think learning leadership and learning strategy and again, proper accounting. Here's one: don't be cheap all the time. Invest in the proper people, the proper tools. That's something that I learned a lot of great things from my dad. But we were so broke at the beginning of our business that we did everything on the super ultra
Mm.
cheap, and so I have that in my blood. And so, like, it's one thing I would again, if I could turn back time, I would overcome that and hire better people, because that's not better, like CFO, for example, or something like that, because that's an investment in growth. It's not an expense. It's an investment. I think uh, proper tools, proper people, and then listening to all those books and so on and the peer
Mm.
groups. Top five, I guess. Probably listed 6 or 7 there, but.
No, it's brilliant. I'm with you. I think the peer group for me, I don't know how many times I've said this, but it just gives me perspective when I need it most. When I'm lost with something and it's just like when in doubt, zoom out. And that's what the group gives me every single time. It's amazing.
And it also
Um,
is rewarding from the other perspective where we talk about that servant leadership.
mm,
It feels great to get advice from the group. It also feels great to give advice, and then someone says, "Oh my gosh, that's great," and it just makes you feel good. It makes you feel like you're
yeah.
doing something. And the other thing we've talked about many times is it's lonely as the CEO position, because there's no one in your company that's at that position, and your wife isn't in that isn't this, well, unless they happen to be a CEO. They don't necessarily want to hear about it all the time, or your
Yep.
husband, and so the peer group, whether it's CEOs or a different level of peer group, I think it's just so helpful to break that feeling of isolation that you can get when you're.
How has running a company for 40 years changed you personally?
Well, it's humbled me a lot. I came out of
Ooh,
college. I came out
hot
of
to trot.
college pretty hot to trot, as most college kids do, right? You see most college students graduate and they know everything, and I certainly did know everything in my own mind. But I love, I just it's taught me humility.
Mm,
It's taught me the value in serving others. Again, it's only in the last 10 years, I would say, that I've really grasped that thought of the more I invest in this person, the better I feel, the better they do, the better my company does. So, one of the most enjoyable things I did in my company was having these book groups recently, in the last 4 or 5 years, probably even more recently than that, 3 years, where we would do leadership books, and anyone in the company could sign up for it. And I would usually do small groups of 5 or 6 people, and I dedicated a couple hours a week to it. And we would just read a couple chapters and then discuss what it meant. It's typically managers in training or leadership people that are up and coming. And it was just so rewarding to hear them learn and grow, and give them examples, real life examples of how what they said makes sense because here's why. Here's an example that I
mhm.
remember from a past experience. And so things, just the giving back feels so good.
Yeah, man. We just recently started book clubs at my work, and we're going through reviews right now. And the people that are in the book club, we have a completely different conversation during our reviews. It's just a completely different maturity level. Because we meet twice a week for a half an hour in a small group and talk about a chapter that is changing people's lives. And you want to talk about filling potential, like reading is one of those ways to do it, especially in groups. Like you can read a chapter
Yeah.
and you can take a lot from it, but you want to really learn a chapter, get in a small group and talk about it, because then you're going to pick up things that you didn't even understand. It's incredibly life changing.
Yeah, I love when I've read most of the books that I did a lot of repetitive books, and I've read most of them 10, 12, 15 times at this point. And when someone comes up with something new that I hadn't thought of or didn't notice or didn't think of it that way, it's just like so great to be involved in that. Yeah, and I agree. It's a whole different level when you have that group accountability and the group discussion, because
Yes.
everyone just gets so much more out of it.
Yeah, and I'm not a reader by nature. I actually don't enjoy reading, but this is if you're not a reader and you're a leader, make a book club at work because it'll hold you accountable to it. It's that simple.
Yeah, and in today's world with the audiobooks and podcasts and so forth, I found that I like reading fiction, love reading
Mm,
fiction, but but nonfiction like leadership books and so on, I get so much more out of it when I listen. I don't know, there's probably
mm.
something wired in my brain for that, but I listen to audiobooks and podcasts and so on when I'm driving, and or when I'm working out or walking or whatever, and it just makes such a difference. So yeah, there's so many different ways to hear the book now in today's world too. So.
Yeah, I saw that on LinkedIn recently too, and I don't think I've wrapped my head around that, but like you are what you surround yourself with, and but a lot of people put that in friendship, but that also goes into the podcast and the things you listen to, right? So the things that you're putting in your head constantly, because I'm with you, I'm an earphones guy. As soon as I'm out of work, like they don't come out of my ears for the next like 8 hours. And so with that, I'm constantly listening to something, whether it's soccer podcasts or whatever. Um, yeah, but you don't realize how much you're gaining or learning or not learning from that, whatever you're listening to.
Yeah, and the thing that I hear some people say is, you listen to a book or a podcast or whatever, and you might say, well, yeah, I've heard that before. I've heard that 10 times before. But if you're not doing it, then it's a good reminder. And that's what I find with myself is almost everything I listen to, I've heard the concept before, or a similar concept. There aren't that many new concepts out there, right?
All right.
But the idea is do you have it in play? Isn't it a good reminder? And so I
Yeah.
find that it's just constant reminders and constant, I said earlier, I'm an emotional person. So constant reminders of how to behave, how to act, how to
Mm.
respond. Super helpful for me.
Yeah, and you know what? The first time you either listened or read it, you were a different person, different mindset, right? You may not have taken it the way you wanted to at that point in time, or it may hit you different because of a life experience recently. So all that I'm with you. I'm reading the books in book club twice now. And it's just, I love the reminders and to really dive deep in even the second time. That's really good. Well, Dan, that is everything I had on my list for you, dude. That was really, really, really good. Is there anything you want to promote or talk about to close this episode out?
No, I appreciate you having me on. I enjoy listening to your podcast because you have such a variety
One
of people
listener.
on and variety of topics. So it's not the type of podcast I usually listen to because I want to listen to this leadership or that thing. But I
Yeah.
like it because it is varied and different, and every episode's unique. So I love it. Thanks for having me on. I appreciate it.
No, thank you for saying that. And really, the concept around that was I didn't want to ever run out of guests. So I figured if I can always talk about people's passions, I'll never run out of guests. And I'm learning. I mean, the other piece of it is, and it's a bit selfish because you said this in another section we were talking about. It is selfish that because I don't like reading, this is a form of reading for me because I'm learning something with every hour or however long the guest is on. So I'm always picking. It's like reading a book for an hour,
Yeah,
essentially.
it's interesting.
But yeah, I don't know. I don't know. At least what I'm telling myself for now.
Yeah.
Well, thank you, Dan Fisher, for coming on, talking about Magic Rent to Own and your recent sale. I'm glad everything's going smooth. You're coming out the back end, and I look forward to seeing what you got going on in the next couple of months/years.
Yeah, looking forward to it. Maybe I'll come back and talk about phase two.
Yeah, hell yeah, dude. That'd be awesome. All right. Well, thanks for coming
All
on.
right. Thanks, Brandon.
Yep.